right. I see the entries have kind of slowed down here a little bit. So in the interest of giving everybody the most time, let's go ahead and just get things started here. So thank you once again for joining. This is for you, the DataPride Tug presenting for your entertainment behind the scenes of IronViz. So today we're going to talk about everything you ever wanted to know about the best event at TC that we all go crazy about every year. We're super lucky to have some amazing guests on with us who I'll introduce in just a second, but really excited about the conversation today. So before we get started, we always like to remind everyone about the mission statement of this user group, and that is to create a virtual community space to highlight, elevate, and bring together the LGBTQIA+ community and our allies. We don't want to get overly political, but we definitely want to recognize that the world can feel like kind of a scary place right now for a lot of people, maybe more so right now than ever since this tug has been around. So we want to kind of create space to reflect on that and reaffirm our mission to be a safe space and a safe place for ideas and collaboration for everyone in the data fam, regardless of the current climate. And I think I speak for my co-leads. We are also here as people, and you feel free to reach out, engage us. We will get through this and we'll get through it together. But we would be remiss not to mention that right now. So we're thinking about all of you, and we're all a family and we got to stay strong. So moving on from that, I want to announce we are also now a group on LinkedIn. This is a new presence for us. We've been posting from it, but haven't really highlighted it yet. So we encourage you to scan the QR code here to join the DataPride Tug group on LinkedIn. That way you'll get posts about our future events, cross-community events, and things like that. So if you're interested, go ahead and scan that that QR code, or search for DataPride Tug and join the group. Pausing there for people to scan for a second. And now move on. So I want to introduce myself. Any of us who haven't met, I'm Kyle Massey. I'm obviously in the center there. I am one of the three co-leads of DataPride. I also co-lead the Data Dev Tableau user group, and I'm a 3-time Tableau Data Dev ambassador. On the phone with us as well is the fabulous Lawrence Durbin, one of my esteemed co-leads, and Sarah Carr. You guys want to introduce yourselves quickly?
Yeah, not on video because going crazy with stuff, but Lawrence Durbin, he, him, his. So excited to be, as always, a co-lead and to hear all these, see all these amazing submissions for IronViz, and to hear from everyone today, and for everyone that's here. Hello.
Hi, friends. I'm Sarah Carr, she, her, joining from Madison, Wisconsin. I'm a Tableau user group ambassador, and it's great to be here with you all. Thanks for joining us.
Awesome. Thank you both. We want to hear from you guys, right? So we're looking for speakers, community members to highlight projects they're working on, get to know yous, networking events. So we've created a Google form to submit speaker interest. You can submit to present a topic, be a community highlight, anything you're interested in. We're trying to get new members involved this year, and do maybe different formats than we've done before. And we want your help. So if you scan this community, I don't know what a community code is or why I keep saying that, but a QR code to take to the form, we'll just get some information from you, and then we'll be in touch. So you can use that code. We'll also make sure that these slides are shared after the fact. The form, thank you, Sarah, is also in the chat, and it's also on our Bevy chapter page. So if you don't get it from the form or from the slide here, you can get it in either of those places as well. So enough about us. We have 4 amazing guests on with us today, who are going to talk all about how their participation in IronViz, what gets them going, maybe tips and tricks. We're going to see. But in no particular order, I would love to introduce our honored guests, Bo McCready, Elisa Davis, Ginny Moench, and Kerine Taylor, in no particular order. And I'm going to shut up and get out of the way now so that our guests can share their amazing content with us. And we are actually going to start with Kerine. So Kerine, I will stop sharing and take it away.
Cool. Hello, everybody. Let me. Cool. I'm just going to have my Viz in the background there. So, hi, my name is Kerine Taylor. As you probably tell from my voice, I'm in the UK. I'm from the UK. I live in Hertfordshire, which is just north of London. I work for Bistery. I'm a senior analytics consultant there. I have been playing around with Tableau for like 7.5 years now. And I'm sure like you, like Tableau becomes like your work as well as your fun as well. I'm also co-lead of Data Plus Women London as well. So check us out as well. I'm going to tell you about how I kind of got to this viz about RuPaul's Drag Race. I want to sort of go through why I entered, and then kind of the ideas that came to me, the process that I went through, and how I got to the final product. So if I think back to around, I think it's like September last year, maybe August, I was thinking about IronViz, and then speaking to a colleague, his name was Sam Parsons, who was a former finalist, and he was like, who's interested in entering IronViz this year? And it's something that I've kind of thought about. You've watched it and you're like, could I do that? Could I? And actually, this year, the kind of everything just kind of aligned. I had no client work at the time. I was doing professional development, and I'm training to become a Tableau trainer. And I don't know if you've been on that journey, it can become very like, you need a break, And actually, entering IronViz was going to give me that kind of variety and add a bit more fun into kind of my day-to-day life back then. So I thought, what, let's just go for it. And I'm someone who just likes to test myself and, put myself out there. So I was like, let's go for it. But then what do I do a Viz about? And speaking to Sam, he talked about the previous themes, and how generally they're quite broad. So you potentially could have, just definitely in the last sort of 5 years, you could have sort of the same viz that could potentially fit into multiple themes. So you don't actually necessarily need to wait until the theme is announced to start thinking about what your viz is going to be about. And so so we started with that, and then he was like, do something that you love, create a viz about something that you love, because you're going to be doing this in your weekends, evenings. If you're bored by it, it's gonna be very difficult. But if you love it and you're really interested in it, then it will become a lot easier. So then I was like, the first thing that came into my head was RuPaul's Drag Race. I am super fan of RuPaul's Drag Race. I watch it a lot, and I thought, why not? Because I had 2 attempts at doing a RuPaul's Drag Race viz before. I kind of have a little graveyard of viz that I started and then kind of just didn't like it, and then they're just now sort of unfinished. And I was like, now's the time to like let's try it and try and do it. So reason why I've kind of been into Drag Race from the beginning, and from before actually, because I kind of discovered drag in 2000, like in the mid noughties, when I went to a a nightclub night called Circus, run by a drag queen called Jodie Harsh in London. And that is kind of where my first sort of, obviously you've seen drag queens on something on TV, but in person, that was kind of like my first experience. And seeing people walking around, and by society norms, they're different, but they own it. It's about being unique and standing out. And that is something that I feel that I can relate to, because throughout my life, I've kind of felt that difference with myself, but it's never been a problem for me. That's just who I am. And to see people who, who also have that kind of same mindset, but then just elevate it to a whole fabulous level, like, I was just in love. And then Drag Race came along, and then I've just been super fan ever since. So then I started to think about like, what's my story? Where can I go with it, basically? And I realized that I watch at least one new episode of Drag Race every week. And I thought to myself, like, when did that happen? At some point I used to have a break, and now it's just like every single week. No, I'm not complaining, really not. But when did that happen? And also, you see the change, like in TV, you see drag queens in mainstream TV shows, events in your local area, like drag brunches, drag story hour. And go back 15, 20 years ago, that didn't happen. There was like a couple on TV, and there were a few events, but they were niche. Where now it's just, there's been that massive change. And then I know the TV show has been huge, and I wanted to kind of can I explore the sort of correlation between the growth in the TV show and also these kind of the wider impact on society and that acceptance of drag. So that was sort of one way I kind of wanted to go, to sort of look at the growth of the show and then the sort of wider impact. So I'm just going to sort of kind of go through a bit on the Viz. So that is basically what I did. I sort of started off looking at how the number of viewers of the TV show has kind of like grown over the years. And then you can sort of see that growth. And then I started looking at, this is what I was talking about. Back in the days when I first started watching drag, you see, there's a year gap pretty much between, and there were only 3 franchises. Skip forward to today. Now this is why I'm watching drag so much. This is why, because not only is there, going a bit too far. Not only is there not even a month where you have a break of no new episodes, look at all of these franchises. And I was like, okay, this is it. This has kind of explained why I'm watching Drag Race so much. And I had the subscription, my subscription is worth it then, because I'm getting quite a lot of use out of it. I'm sure we've got loads of subscriptions to things that we don't watch anything. But anyway, yeah. And then so I kind of wanted to go on and see, like, for the queens themselves, like what is their impact of being on the show, and how they're looking at Instagram alone, like you can just see the growth in their followers. And I kind of got to this point. I had a lot more as well of other things where, other kind of visualizations I created, kind of all sorts telling a similar story. And then I thought to myself, there's kind of like another side that we need to be kind of address and think about, which is the protest at drag events, the legislation against and the legislation against drag events. And just generally, like, I'm not in America, but obviously I hear a lot of things. And then there have been some sort of protests as well in the UK. And I thought, I can't really do this I didn't want to do this whole, viz of like, oh, it's positively, everything's great and it's grown and it's amazing, without kind of addressing that as well. So I found a data set that had all of like the protests. It just had listed all of the protests just generally in US. And then I had to kind of like filter it down to ones that were about drag. And I wanted to then sort of go on to that. But I kind of found like I didn't have sort of a middle, how to get from drag race to protests. I didn't find that data, and I'm sure the others will find like finding the data is hard, and it's not you don't necessarily have the data for everything. So I kind of decided I'm going to tell that story through pictures. And I know it's a visualization. This is still visual, isn't it? I know it's a visualization competition, but I thought using like images to kind of tell that story. So this is, you know, the growth of these are the events that have popped up since the show. But then on the other side, this is the movement or whatever they want to call themselves that is now, you know, trying to fight these events. And yeah, so I thought this was kind of like a good way to kind of like bridge that. And then this was like the protest data that I found, which I just felt was amazing to see, like that growth of like fighting against that anti-drag movement, how each year on year like that pro-drag movement is growing and matching the kind of like the number of protests at each and every event. And I just thought that was beautiful. This, I have to tell you a little bit about this. I did firstly did this as a radial Sankey chart using one of the Viz extensions, and like 2 days before I thought, oh, let me just publish it. Oh, you're shaking your head. She knows. Yeah, I published it to Tableau Public just to see, and then saw that it's not available on Tableau Public, and then it was just a mad rush to try and figure out. I've never done a Sankey chart from scratch, but I have now. This is the fun of IronViz. So if anyone wants to enter IronViz, make sure you publish, check it on Tableau Public more than 2 days in advance. It's been mad if I did it on the day, but glad I was able to kind of like get it, you know, get something. Yeah, and then I just thought finish it off with also these protests have led to legislation, which to me is just mad. I can't imagine that being a thing, but it is. And then trying to tie it all in with like the, you know, if you find this shocking, do something about it and vote. Well, obviously this was before the elections, and yeah, things didn't quite go that way. But you know, in the future, there's still, you know, if you keep speaking up, then things can change, and that is what we need to do. So, and that was it. Oh, I forgot to mention, sorry, one thing I forgot to say. I also used this opportunity to sort of test out my Illustrator skills. So I also think like IronViz is just an opportunity just to try out new things that you haven't done before. And I'd recommend it to anybody who wants to try it. I didn't make the top 10, but there's always next year, the year after, you know. It's about learning and about fun and love. That's it. Thank you. Thank you for listening. I feel like I should end it with like, if you can't love yourself, then how the hell are you going to love somebody else? Can I get an amen? And then it's like,
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kerine. I loved hearing all about that. And I love the call to action and the, you know, like you said, having both fun with it, but also looking at like, this is a serious social issue and we can't just sit idly by. I love it. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, next up is Elisa.
Hello. Let me share my screen. Hello. So, if we haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet, my name is Elisa Davis. I have been using Tableau for about 7 years. My Tableau career is as old as my kids, so it's really easy to remember. I did my first Tableau training sitting there in that classroom when I was pregnant. Like the very first weekend, I felt him move. So that was pretty great. I've been selected a Tableau ambassador 3 times. I led a community project called Back to Viz Basics for 3 years. It's still running, and they release prompts every other week that have a data set that's really tailored to a specific chart type. So if you just need to jump in and knock out a viz to get the momentum going, you're never too new and you're never too experienced to practice. And it's great which is also a great reason to do IronViz, because when you want to attempt something new and complicated and creative, it's way more fun to figure it out doing a topic that you personally enjoy instead of feeling under the gun for a client deadline. I know I've seen someone amazing on Tableau Public do this super crazy thing. And do I put it in my wireframe? Do I promise it to the client knowing that I'll have to study? Or do I say, oh, maybe we could do a thing like this? And then you show them this fun thing and they're like, oh yeah, okay, great. I had the honor to win the Michael Christiani Community Leadership Vizzy in 23. And a couple of fun facts: I got to go to Iceland this year, and I ate fermented shark, and chased it, which is traditionally followed down by a shot of something called the Black Death. And I tried it twice. It was an interesting experience. I think if I was ever in Iceland again, I would try it a 3rd time. Enough about me. Let's talk about the Viz. So, my Viz topic this year for IronViz was Chapel Roan. This is my 3rd time submitting a Viz to IronViz out of 4 attempts, I think. There was one year where I had an idea, and then it was the first year, it was in October, and I think that timing is terrible. Because everybody is getting ready. Like it's such a busy time of the calendar year. But I understand that it's also the timing that works with having conference when it is. So here we are. And I'm going to talk a little bit about inspiration, story design, data gathering super briefly, interactivity, and just the fun that I had with this Viz. I knew I was gonna, I had a hope to enter IronViz this year. Every year that I've pulled together an entry and submitted it, it's been a fantastic experience, full of ups and downs, full of way more effort than you want to put into something that feels like work outside of work. But at the same time, it's structure, it's motivation, it's got a built-in cheering committee. There's sort of this community of collaboration, and everybody is cheering for everybody to do their best work, because I think like a secret is that, I don't know about you guys, but I don't mind not being a finalist at IronViz. Like I'm shooting for top 10. Top 3 sounds like a lot of effort. No offense, Bo. And obviously it's a huge honor. And if it were to ever happen, yeah, and Lisa's in the audience, she's laughing at me. But yeah, top 10 would be fun. Top 3 seems kind of terrifying. But so I'm like really taking advantage of the structure of the event and the cheerleading and the opportunity to kind of put together a showcase that encapsulates the edge of my Tableau ability at that given point in time. So I hoped to enter this year. I had just taken the advanced Flairledge advanced boot camp because I wanted the structure to kind of walk me through some of the more advanced chart types that I knew were possible, but it kind of felt confusing and overwhelming to actually go unpack somebody's viz. So, sit me down and walk me through it. I've been to their talks. And so the assignment at the end of that class was to create a viz using several of the chart types or techniques that you had gone through. And I was like, well, an IronViz submission, my final project, kill 2 birds with 1 stone. So when they announced entertainment, we got the topic a week early, which I really appreciated. I feel like they gave us that extra week to brainstorm, and I really used it to run through ideas. Having tried to enter a couple of times, I've had great ideas that I had no data for. I've had ideas that I had a lot of data for, but I wasn't excited about. So for me, for an IronViz entry, you're really trying to find that thing that there's data, the data is available, you can get it, and you're also excited and interested. So those were my first 2 ideas for this year. I was going to use the TV data and the movie data and do a lot of complex data wrangling and this, that, and the other thing. And it was just getting to be such a slog to get that data back out of the hyper files. And I was at the point where I was like installing SQLite shells on my personal computer. And I was like, what am I doing? Like, I have dabbled in this stuff, but I am not a data engineer. I am not a data dev. I'm trying to figure out how to write things against an API call. Like, this is useful, but this is not going to be like my joy in this project. Yeah, I still might do that viz, Kyle. Like Kerine was saying, there's always next year. The themes are pretty broad. So right around that time when I was about to say, let's not, whatever. I've got a stable job. I've got competing priorities. October is a terrible time, like all these excuses. And then I was like, but wait, what about Chapel Roan? I've been hearing a lot about her recently, and it could be really interesting to me personally to do that deep dive and get all of this sort of niche enthusiasm. And so I did. And the first part, like, I knew there was data out there, but I wasn't exactly sure what I needed to go do. So my process for this is always do a deep dive, go all the way down to the bottom of the internet, and then push off the bottom, come back up for air, let your thoughts marinate, and then get them all out in front of you. So this is my wireframe. It kind of congealed around a couple of key questions because IronViz is a short enough time, and quite frankly, the design capabilities of Tableau are terrible enough. Like, you can't group things. Why can we not group objects and move them around together in the year of our Lord 2025? Sorry, personal viz, but like anybody else who is equal parts designer and data nerd, what I wouldn't do. It's easier to build a viz this size if you have a pretty good idea of the overall design structure before you get started. How many different points you have? Are you going to take those 10,000 pixels and chop them up evenly? Are you going to need more space than that? Do you want to sort of make, like, how is the structure of the viz going to work? Are you tabbing through pages? Like, what's happening? So who is Chapel Roan? What was her path to fame? Those were the 2 questions that I started with. And I had a lot of the design elements that you'll see. So I envisioned this as a corkboard that I would have all sorts of fun stuff pinned up onto because it just kind of fit her vibe. She was interviewed for the cover of Rolling Stone magazine, and she was sitting there while she was being interviewed, bedazzling her coffee grinder, and her vibe is very drag and very over the top. So I thought it would just be fun. So her path to fame, her artist, I wanted to look at the music. I had this idea that she was different from the lesbian singer-songwriters that I had grown up with when I was an undergrad at Smith, which is a women's college in New England. We listened to a lot of lesbian singer-songwriters. So there was this popness, there was this raunchiness that you usually associate with male rappers, that she was bringing that energy into her sexuality and into her sort of like assertiveness, or at least her stage personality. So that was interesting to me. It seems like she was more positive and fun and upbeat than I remembered. And so there are all these analytical questions, and some of them got cut because they're, quite frankly, this was too big of a question. Was early 2000 music just more depressing in general? Can we tease out her sort of positiveness versus anyway. The music context, I was going to look at her influences. I was going to look at and I did this one. I didn't end up looking at her versus her influences because I ended up focusing more on this, what I called vintage lesbians, which, it's a little bit of a cheeky turn of phrase, and this is brainstorming. But then to tie in with Kerine, what you were talking about, like the culture context, why does this matter? Drag bans, anti-LGBTQ legislation, like we've gone somewhere, but for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And I wanted to have a call to action down here. So this is what it turned into. This is the whole thing at once. And I had a lot of fun designing this Viz. A couple things got cut, a couple things that were very sort of lightly sketched out, got fleshed out much more succinctly or much more extensively once I got into the actual data. So this whole like compare her to her context was it's like a statement in my wireframe because I knew I needed the data to see what the data said, to see how to present it. I spent the most time developing this one. I'm actually going to flip ahead a couple slides because once you've got the idea to get from those sketches with coffee stains to a full-on corkboard, you have to actually go find some data. And there are 6 data sets in this Viz, and there should have been 10, but I ran out of time. So I'm positive. So let's see, on this first page, who is she, her rising popularity, some key events. This absolutely could have been collapsed into one chart. And if I were to go back and do it again and make it more of like an annotated line chart, but again, out of time. And so you just do something that's good enough and move on. The Billboard Hot 100 data, I scraped a whole pile of JSONs. Kyle, this will make you sad, but I did it by hand. I downloaded each and every one of them. And then I stacked them all up in a data source workbook because, use the skills you have. And it was going to be faster to click on a year's worth he is crying. It was going to be faster to click on the full year's worth of weekly data and then stack it all up versus do it the right way. So this is why I love being partnered with a data engineer. And then this tour history data was actually the one that I got first. I had heard the quote that she'd spent 7 years becoming an overnight success. So this question of like, how hard did this woman work to become the best new artist of the year? Like, what does it mean to be new, right? Like, she isn't newly an artist. This isn't the first year that she's been creating music, but it is the first year that she's had this breakthrough popular acclaim. So this part was really significant to me, especially because one of the shows that she played back in the early days was the local music venue that was a 5-minute walk from my dorm. So those days are gone. You're not going to see her in a 200-person venue anytime soon. But, like being able to envision the journey from that to accepting the Grammy for Best New Artist was pretty crazy. And then this is analytically the heaviest piece, but there are websites out there that'll pull the API data for you from Spotify. So if you're interested in music analysis, absolutely check it out. And then these were screenshots of why it all mattered. Like, why is a lovely young woman's professional success significant to me, a 40-year-old? Other than the fact that, like, once you start listening to her music, you're never going to stop humming it. So, and unfortunately, I ran out of time. And that was also the part of the Viz that I was less excited about, because I think, if you've heard me present at DataPride before, it's just real depressing to visit about how much other people hate us. Like, that's not the story that gets me excited, but it is part of the context of why I was motivated to do this sort of joyful, uplifting, fun kind of Viz. So there's more I could talk about. And I didn't even get into the Viz itself, but I am at time, so I will skip down. I guess I'll hit these really close. I used a lot of interactivity in this Viz. I was inspired by, I don't know if you guys used to play those like hunt and click Flash games when Adobe Flash was a gaming platform, basically, but there's lots of like, click here to find the thing. And so there's a lot of Easter eggs in the Viz. And then I love the ability to bring your own lens into any analysis that you do in Tableau. So I use parameter actions. I used a lot of show hide to bring in kind of a different voice to the story, because on the surface, it's this bulletin board put together by a joyful, savvy super fan, but it's also an analytical piece. So being able to get a little more serious with that, but in a way that was sort of like didn't spoil the tone of the overall Viz. So you can do a lot with custom buttons and show hide. It's really fun. And I would be remiss if I didn't at least show you. This was from the frame of the wire, from the section of the wireframe where I talked about doing a radar chart of her songs on her new album. And this was not something that I had done before, and Viz extensions do not work. Which was something that I was already aware of. So this didn't catch me early, but I did use a Viz extension to mock up the individual radar chart, and then went and dug through the back catalog of Flairledge blogs to figure out how to actually turn these little spiky stars into a bedazzled small multiples radar chart. So this is kind of like the technical showstopper for me of this Viz. Every time I do an IronViz submission, there's sort of like one visual that's really the core of it for me. And this is that for me for this project. So any questions? From the chat, I'm getting lots of compliments. Love it so much. If you're inspired by me to make your own, like, how would I do this? On my Tableau public profile page, I've put together a starter corkboard with lots of the design elements, and you can download this and copy off each of you can corkboard whatever you want. And if you do, post it on whatever social is still alive and tag me or drop me a note. You can copy paste dashboard items, and that's a really easy way to add new elements. And as a fun accessibility tidbit, I did alt text in the first push pin that I added in, and in the first post-it, and then I just copied and pasted all of those. So there's probably over 100 push pins on that bulletin board, and every one of them says that they're a push pin. So who's our next victim if there's no questions?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Elisa. I love it. Like everybody's saying in the chat, it just makes me happy. It just makes you happy to look at and think about. And I love the context you gave too of like, she's not new. You know what I mean? Like it happens all the time. Artists are around and they're very successful and they have a devoted following. But until the right person hears them, you know, they're not always taken as seriously for the talent that they have. So I love that context as well. Awesome.
And if somehow you haven't seen Chappell Roan perform before, I would recommend starting with her NPR Tiny Desk set.
Yes, that is an amazing concert.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Well, next up, we are going to move on to Bo. Take it away.
All right. Thanks, Kyle. And thanks, everybody. Sharing my screen real quick. So, all right. So a couple things I'm gonna kick off here before I'm sorry. When I do that like screen thing, then I can't see y'all. So it's just gonna have to look like this for a minute. Cool. Yeah. So I'm Bo. I'm calling in today from Austin, Texas. And so two things I'm gonna lead with. I have a sinus infection right now. If I cough, if I have to drink water, I apologize. One of the wonderful things about living in Austin is that in early February here, I have a warm, sunny day outside. I'm going to wear this t-shirt outside. It's beautiful, but the cedar is absolutely oppressive. And so like every January and February, I just spend the whole time coughing. So I'm going to apologize in advance if that happens. I'm also going to call out, these are new slides. This is my first time presenting about this project, you know, since this whole cycle kicked off. So like, I'm keeping an eye on the chat here. If y'all have questions, if there's anything you want me to talk about or not talk about, you know, I'm gonna be keeping an eye on things as I go. So please don't feel like you are interrupting a well-practiced flow or anything that I'm bringing into this. Just throw out whatever you want, and I'm happy to dive into it. So. Yeah, so I'm Bo, pronouns he, him, his. You can find me on most socials at Bo Knows Data. And yeah, I'm super excited to be back with this group again and talking about this project. I don't have a background slide on myself, but you know, I'll just share that I've actually been working in Tableau since 2012. So kind of my first grown-up adult job, the real start of my career. You know, adopted Tableau pretty quickly after that. So yeah, so even though I have changed industries and roles and kind of states and all different stuff in my career, but Tableau has been kind of a rock and a constant for me the whole time. And so today I'm going to talk maybe a little bit about the Viz itself, but like less of a technical deep dive and more just kind of a reflection on what the IronViz journey has been for me, because I'm very happy and excited to be one of the IronViz finalists this year, and this is not my first attempt or my first entry. So there's definitely kind of a lot of history that goes into this. So with that, I'll jump in. So my IronViz journey really goes back and starts in 2017. I found this text that I sent to my wife, my first in-person IronViz competition. This was the year that Tristan won, if any of y'all were around and checking stuff out at the time. But like, I was so taken in by the experience that I felt like I had to send a photo and be like, look at this, like, look at this thing. This is such a wild experience. So yeah, so even though I didn't really start kind of popping up in the community until, you know, a few years later, the seeds were planted for sure at that point. And so it wasn't until 2019 that I thought, you know, why don't I take a run at this? You know, kind of some of the you know, questions that, you know, Kerine had talked about as well. Like, yeah, maybe I can do this. Maybe I do fit into this. And so so I started. This was back in the day in 2019 when there were actually like multiple qualifiers every year for IronViz. So I have more entries than years in this. But sorry, I think my video froze for a second. But Yeah. Anyway, so so the three qualifier rounds, back in the day, it was like to make the finals, you had to finish, first place in one of those qualifiers. So and that was also back in the day when like there was a theme, but you got your data set. Everyone was going to develop off of the same thing. So it was kind of a different time, a different experience. And so I think the first one I did was, using agricultural data. And so kind of my whole journey kicked off with this like kind of lighthearted question of like, where in the US are there more cows than people? I grew up in rural Wisconsin, so this was a very relevant concept there. And so, it's just definitely something you joke about, in those rural areas. And so, I just thought, hey, why don't I take this kind of like joke and turn it into a project and like actually try to do something serious with it. And that was back in the time too, when like I was kind of trying to figure out who I was, where my career was, and where I wanted to go with it. And I was sharing a lot of work on Reddit at the time, on the Data is Beautiful community. And so definitely had some of those projects get kind of a lot of attention and fun engagement there. And I thought, okay, yeah, this is cool. I want to dive into this more and learn a little bit more about this world for sure. And so so I've been entering IronViz since 2019. Prior to this year, I'd finished in the top 10 3 times, which kind of gave me the motivation to keep going, I guess I'd say. And at last year's Tableau conference, I was chatting with Paul, who was the winner a couple of years ago, and I was kind of sharing like, yeah, I've been in the top 10, a few times, and like maybe I'm just not going to quite make it there. And he. It was just the briefest interaction, but he was like, yeah, but that shows that you're right there, right? Like you're right there, you're on the cusp of it. And so, that was kind of one of the many interactions over the years that was like, okay, yeah, I can maybe give this a shot again. So as those of you who've entered before, it's a massive amount of time and effort, and you have a month there where you kind of, hobbies and other stuff kind of has to fall by the wayside to give this to give this attention and make this kind of the primary hobby. So I do feel like every year I have these moments of like, am I really going to do this again? I talk to my wife like, am I gonna get into this again? And what is this going to look like? And so after last year, I was kind of like, what, I think maybe I'm done. I've had fun. I think I've had some top 10s. It's been cool. I've learned a lot. Maybe I'm done. Maybe I'm done with this. But then the itch kind of started to crop up again, and then they announced the theme, and by the time that everything kicked off, the names are hidden here, but you can see September 30th of last year, before things were officially open, sent this message to a dear friend in the community on Twitter. I swore I was done with IronViz after last year, but here we go again. So if you take this screenshot against my final project, you can see that the seeds were there, kind of from the very beginning of the window. And so I have the header here, like why try again? And there's a lot of different answers to that. After 6 or 7 or whatever it was prior entries, why keep getting back in the ring? But I think ultimately what it came down to for me was like, this was a dream, and it was a dream of mine to see like, can you do this someday? And I guess I wasn't ready to give up yet. And so I dove back in. And so I loved these little graphics that Tableau did for the finalists. So I'm borrowing this whenever I can. I thought it was super fun. But this is the kind of quick high level overview of most of the views on the dashboard. I'm not going to dive into them technically, but if people have questions or want to pop in and ask anything, I'm more than happy to answer. But kind of process-wise, how I got to this final design. So I started with some familiar data, and Elisa, I'm sorry to share, but maybe for the future, this is great. There's a wonderfully curated Billboard Hot 100 data set that Sean Miller, who some of y'all might know as Hipster Viz Ninja, curates on his GitHub page. I have used this many times over the years. It's structured like this, and so like I I had the topic in mind. It was something I thought about, worked with before, and I thought, okay, I know this data set. I know what's here. I know what's not here, and I know some of the creative ways that I'm going to use it. So it was kind of a given for me that I was gonna jump in. I was going to use this right away. And then I would say I also used what I would call new-ish data using the Spotify API. I certainly don't identify myself as a dev the way that somebody like Kyle would, but I have a little experience doing this kind of stuff, and had worked with the Spotify API before, so was able to kind of spin up some scripts to get some data out of there that I wanted to use about kind of audio characteristics and things like that. And then also just bring some new learning into the project for myself as well, because, if it didn't work out finals wise, I was like, hey, maybe I can learn to write a script to make a playlist out of an Excel file. And so I did that as well. And so that was kind of part of my learning process. So just a little snippet of the code here. So I call this new-ish data. I'd worked with the API before. I kind of knew what I was doing, but at the same time, wanted to push that API to do some things that I hadn't done before. But in terms of the data used for this, it was generally stuff that I was pretty familiar with. So I think, I dove into building the Viz very, very quickly. After things opened, and spent kind of a lot less time on the data collection phase. So another thing I wanted to call out that I brought into the process, fun. Maybe it goes without saying here, but my wife and I operate a little screen printing shop on the side where we make our own designs. So we like to get into the design aspect of things, and so as you can see from the Twitter message a few slides ago, before I even worked with any data, I was making a mascot for the project and trying to figure out how I could use that as the turn on, turn off, help function as well. So for me, it was also just a chance to play around with colors and design and learn some new things that way, and have some fun. And so for these slides, I borrowed the layout and aesthetic of the Viz as well. So so I would say for me, and as Ginny calls out, the design aspect can be one of the more challenging pieces, I think, particularly for something that, does really well in the IronViz world. And so, so I tried to, through the scripts I wrote and through working with familiar data sets, to get as quickly as possible into design so that I could spend, 2 days on the data and 28 days on what I was going to do with it. So these are my little characters. I'm proud of them. They were fun. And then I think another thing that I can't talk about this project without calling out support. The support I received along the way. It's not the first time I participated in the awesome IronViz feedback initiative led by Sarah Bartlett, but I took full advantage this time. Did multiple meetings with awesomely talented folks who gave me some, amazing perspective on the project. And I was looking through my message history and, kind of seeing all the people that I bounced different ideas off of, over the weeks of the competition window. And it's my work, but it's the culmination of years of feedback and conversations and all the awesome input I got from other people. So cannot talk about this project without recommending this to future participants and acknowledging the influence that it made on my work. So I think what I wanted to go through briefly today, I've entered a bunch of times before, but not made that final 3 before. And so I was kind of doing a little reflection last night on what was different this time? Why did this project land in a way that some of the other ones didn't? And I go back here and I look at some of these entries, and a couple of them I'm like, yeah, this was really cool. And I stand by this today. And a couple others I'm like, boy, you really kind of missed the boat on this one, and it didn't really work the way that I wanted it to. And so trying to reflect on some things that are different this time, and also acknowledging that this project here in the bottom center, this one, I think I finished 3rd in the US region when they were doing the regional qualifiers. So this was almost a finalist project, and it was very different than what I did this year. So totally want to acknowledge too that your mileage may vary. If this one had, finished first instead of third, then my takeaways for like what makes a great IronViz final project might be very, very different. But at the same time, this is the course, so so I'm gonna reflect on what was different for me this year. So I think as you're thinking about doing this in the future and what makes it kind of a cool, fun experience, things that helped me this time around. I decided on my topic very, very quickly. I think, as has been called out in this meeting, the topics for IronViz, there are themes, but they're often very, very broad. And I think you see in the final entries this year and in, a lot of the other things that were done for this project, it's a big theme. And so if you're going through the year and you're thinking like, I'm really passionate about this thing and I want to do something about this, odds are probably good you can shoehorn it into the theme at the end of the day. So I decided on my topic fast. But before the window even officially opened, I was like, yeah, I want to go back to this. Like, I'd played with data in this area before, and I just thought this is it. I understand the topic, I know the background, I know the history. I'm gonna go here right away. I think for me, bringing yourself and your personal history into a project is always, kind of an interesting decision. And for me, it was actually easier this time to go less personal. I think some of my prior IronViz projects, I have really, really poured my heart into it and brought kind of, family history and challenging things and, reflections to tough times in my life, which on the one hand helped with the processing, but on the other hand, it was almost too deep to be something for kind of a competition like this. So it was easier for me to have fun and, treat this with a positive spirit by making it definitely personal still. Like you'll see, myself is in this project, but it's not such a deeply personal thing this time. I think it also helped me to do, all existing and or familiar data. I had to make the Spotify data sets myself, but I knew how to write the code to do that. Sean's amazing work on the Billboard data meant that I didn't really have to do anything there other than, write some calcs. So that helped a ton. I think the biggest change for me, and I already had a slide about this, but I collected a lot more feedback from others this time than I have in prior years. The project really evolved a lot based on that. I think that I'd kind of gone into IronViz in the past thinking that like, I don't want to impose on anybody. I don't want to bother people. I don't want to, they've probably got their own projects, their entries, and, lots of stuff to worry about. And like, I would feel bad if I asked them. But this is such a wonderful and supportive community, and that's, definitely not the case. So I think this time I leaned on the advice of others a lot more, and I think the end product was so much better because of that. I think another piece for me was the obsessive attention to design. I think my project was, 5% data collection, 10% figuring out the story, and the rest probably figuring out how I wanted to present it. And I think, I look at my prior IronViz projects, and I think there's always like a graph or a component or something that I look back and I'm like, this didn't really work. And I kind of knew that at the time, but I left it in anyway. So it's like, it's fine. This year I approached it a little bit differently. And anytime there was something that wasn't working 100% the way that I wanted it to, I just cut it from the project. So that was a change in approach this year for me, learning to be kind of brutal with my own, like, I liked this idea. I was in love with this for a while, but ultimately I couldn't make it do what I wanted it to do. And so it just gets left on the cutting room floor, and the project's a little shorter, but that's okay. And finally, just a different call out. I've tended to always do very, very long entries. I associate IronViz with scroll down, scroll down, scroll down. And a lot of the amazing projects over the years have been that way. But I just thought, let's try something different. Let's have people, let's click through it. Let's make each one of these kind of, almost like a slide that fits easily on a screen, and then just, kind of constrain the topics that way. So that was different. I enjoyed that experience. And, was it? Yeah, Kyle, good tip. Always remove one thing or accessory before leaving the house. Maybe we should all think about that for dashboards. Just cut out one element, and then publish. It's a great perspective. Cool. So without taking up too much time, those are my reflections on process. That's been the journey. These are some things I did differently this time. It was a blast, and it's kind of just gotten started. So, what's next? see me at IronViz in April. If y'all are able to attend in person, I'd love to see you. I'd love to say hi and chat and see old friends on this call, but also make new friends. And if you like what I do, there's always that audience vote at the end. So if you think I earned it, feel free to shoot me your vote in that. But yeah, again, thanks so much for having me here to talk about this. This is my first time really talking in depth about this project, and I'll always happy to be with y'all. So thank you.
Thank you both. Thank you. I really love the insightful look into what your process was. Like you said, the personal versus not personal, 5% data, 10% story, and then just design. I loved hearing about that. And congratulations again on making the top 3. And I'm sure you've got a built-in fan base cheering squad in
much
this.
Appreciate it. Yeah, thank you so much.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. And last but certainly not least, we're gonna move on to Ginny.
Thanks, Kyle. I hope my cheering section in the next room, otherwise known as my birds, don't get too loud during the presentation. If they do, bear with me. Share my screen. All right. And screen's up okay. All right, so hi, I'm Ginny Moench. For those of you who don't know me, my pronouns are she, her, and I work as an enrollment management business intelligence analyst at Appalachian State University, which is in the beautiful mountains of North Carolina, if you're not familiar. I also co-lead the higher education TUG. We meet monthly, virtually. It's a lot of fun, even if you're not in higher ed. So I kind of think I took a similar approach to Bo in reflecting back on a lot of my old IronViz entries when I started to think about this presentation. It made me very reminiscent. So hopefully you will bear with me for a brief trip down memory lane and look back at some of my old IronViz entries, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And there's one in particular that is very ugly. So the IronViz 2025 feeder was the 9th time I've participated. I've submitted an entry every year since 2018. And even in the years where we did 3, I usually only did 1 feeder just because time constraints. So I almost didn't do one this year. I had a lot of excuses for not wanting to do one. October 2024 was incredibly difficult time. We were dealing with the aftermath of Hurricane Helene. And I already had this 1 week worth of travel planned across the US to go visit Washington State for the first time and see family there. And then I got sick right after that trip. Thank you, flying on an airplane in October. So yeah, I had a lot of reasons why I could have skipped this entry, but that would have ruined my perfect record. I didn't really want to do that. So I stuck it out, persevered, and managed to do an entry this year. But looking back, this is my very first IronViz feeder entry. And if you're familiar at all with some of my dashboards, you know that romance novels is quite often a theme of my dashboards. And this was the very first one looking at Harlequin romance novels specifically, and their titles more specifically. So as I have never made it into the top 10 and definitely not the top 3. So when I think about why I enter IronViz, it's really because of that learning aspect. When I learn, you can't lose. So that learning aspect is why I keep entering year after year after year. And so I thought back about what did I learn from each of these earlier IronViz entries. And in this one, I really learned about data cleanup. This was back in 2018, didn't have Tableau prep at the time, really didn't know a whole lot about, I was just getting into the data world. I'd been working with Tableau for several years at that point, but it was early versions and, it's come a long way since then. So I learned a lot about data cleanup in building this viz. And I also use the story layout, which very, very seldom you see in IronViz entries. And you can tell that I, tried to use a lot of different chart types and a lot of different colors, and probably not the best design choices. But when you come to 2019, I mean, this one is, if I had to say the good, the bad, and the ugly, this one is the ugly. This is like my most hated, terrible color scheme that I've ever used in a Viz, and I don't really know why I chose it. I remember when I was working on this, I wanted it to look like a radio, but it doesn't really do that either. But what did I learn from this particular Viz? I learned about manual data collection, because in order to build the data set for this Viz, I would sit and listen to the radio for hours on end and write down the songs that were played and make notations in all the columns about, is the singer a male or a female, which station is it on, the name of the group or the artist, and what time it was played, all that stuff. And I remember sitting in my grandma's living room working on this Viz. I can remember working on every single one of these Vizes. The first one I remember being in my office on my lunch break. This one I remember being at my grandma's house, because I was in a new job and commuting from, and living with my grandma and commuting from there, because it was too far to drive from home. So I would live there during the week and go home on the weekends. It was a crazy time, but yeah, that's what I remember about working on this Viz. And then in 2020, I did a really personal Viz about type 1 diabetes, which my father had. And I was also building this, it was the COVID pandemic. I had just had surgery and I was sitting on the couch recuperating for the whole month that I was building this Viz. It was the first time I'd done a long form Viz too. So I learned a lot about how precise you have to be with that layout. I can't even remember how many times I had to start over with this one. And then in 2021, I did another pretty personal Viz about the music that made up, quote, the soundtrack of my life. But this one was a lot more fun and colorful. It allowed me to play around with animations, and it was a lot of fun to build. And I also learned about extracting Spotify data for this Viz. And then in 2022, I did what is still to this day my personal favorite IronViz entry on the Art of the Clinch, which is, the typical romance novel cover, more common in vintage romance novels. I spent at least 60 hours on this one. I would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning because I was so excited about it. I just couldn't wait to Viz before I had to start work for the day. Never before or since have I had that much enthusiasm for any Viz. But and this one is way over the top. It probably could benefit from some of that trimming that we were talking about with Bo's presentation too. But I also felt like being over the top was exactly what romance novel covers were about. So I just went with it. So I learned a lot of things from this Viz, but most especially how to use map layers for building images. And that was a really good learning experience. And then in 2022, it was followed with a bingo Viz for the games theme. And this is where I learned to create my own images, actually in PowerPoint, not Figma or Canva or any of those, but in PowerPoint. And I also had to write some more complicated calculations to build this than I was used to doing for other Vizes that I do for my personal work, not necessarily for work. And then in 2023, I did another romance novel themed IronViz entry. This one about collecting book covers by my favorite cover artist, Sharon Spiak. And this is the one where I learned to do a bee swarm chart for the first time, which was a lot of fun. And that brings us to this year's Viz. Welcome to Shondaland. I don't know about you, but when I first heard that the theme was entertainment, I knew I was going to use the Data Plus TV data set. And I thought about using the Data Plus movies as well. Ended up just doing Data Plus TV. And unlike in previous years where I spent a whole lot of time thinking about what the theme should be for the Viz, and I usually ended up changing my mind 2 or 3 times or 10, and then scrapping it halfway through and starting all over. yeah, not this time. I knew from early on I wanted to do a viz about Shonda Rhimes because I absolutely love her work. And I mean, why? If you're not familiar with Shonda Rhimes, you may not know she is an incredible writer. She has really captivating story themes that just capture your attention, hold your attention. And she's really focused on diversity. Like her TV shows do not shy away from LGBTQ characters. And most recently in Bridgerton and Queen Charlotte, she showcases people of color in roles they would never be seen in otherwise, like the Queen of England. So anyway, I love her work. Wanted to focus on all of her TV shows instead of just focusing on like one TV show that wouldn't let me go in depth as much as I wanted. But anyway, all that, not to say I didn't think about other ideas first. I did start a Trello sheet. Sorry, I was supposed to go through all these as I was explaining what I love about her, but we'll get back to the viz in a minute. The way I brainstorm is on a little Trello sheet, and then I just started writing down all these different ideas, just brainstorming at first. And as you can see, all of these are just like TV shows that I like. And like I said before, I didn't think focusing on one TV show would give me enough data to work with because I couldn't go into as much detail. But when I got to the bottom of the list and wrote down Bridgerton, then I thought, that's when it clicked. That's when I thought, not just Bridgerton, but all of Shonda Rhimes' TV shows, or as it ended up being 7 of her TV shows. So when I started playing the viz, like Elisa, I like to sketch it out using pencil and paper. I use pencil so I can erase it and go back. So this is my initial sketch. It's not really too far off from the final version. I knew I wanted the title at the top. Now the title changed several times. I knew I wanted like an introductory paragraph with some information about Shonda Rhimes and what an incredible person she is. And then I knew that I wanted to have these clickable buttons, ratings, awards, characters, and start with Grey's Anatomy. Grey's Anatomy was the first Shonda Rhimes show I ever started. It might be her first. Pretty sure it might be. And I was obsessed with this when I was in grad school. I still have it on DVD. Who even has DVDs anymore? I've seen every single episode of every single season, still watch it to this day. But the first 5 seasons were probably my favorite. I knew I wanted to have, like I said, these clickable buttons for ratings, awards, and characters. And I also knew that I wanted to do another long form viz. This is the viz in its entirety. And you might notice this little red stripe that kind of not only divides the pieces of the viz, but unifies it as a whole. And that was my ode to the Shondaland roller coaster. I did try to create some sort of roller coaster version in using AI, Google Gemini specifically. Wasn't happy with any of them, so I scrapped that idea and just did this myself. Anywho, so you can see in the original, like I said, I have 3 buttons. I ended up having 4. I ended up adding this overview button kind of later on because I realized that I needed an introduction to each show. The overview is where I share about the synopsis, how long it's been on the air, the number of seasons, number of episodes. And I really wanted all that text to be inside the TV screen, but because of the size limitation, it never quite fit right. And I wanted, the print to be large enough for it to be accessible. And so it never quite worked out. So I had to settle with putting them underneath. But let's go into the viz to talk about the rest of it. All right, so we start with our introduction to Shonda Rhimes. I have some like text boxes and arrows here just to kind of orient you to the interaction that comes built into the Viz. And I also have this clickable show hide button at the top to show the sources and to attribute the icons to the correct artist there. And then I built these out using dynamic zone visibility. That was, let's not say that I learned dynamic zone visibility from building this Viz, but I definitely got better at it because I always thought it was really challenging before, and having to do it over and over and over again for this Viz really helped cement that process in my brain. So now I can do it much faster, much easier, and incorporate it into my work a lot more than I would have before. Before I would have used sheet swapping, but now I find dynamic zone visibility to be just much more, I find it to be a better option because, for instance, these little introductions at the beginning of each are actually titles on the worksheet. And if you're just using sheet swapping with parameter actions, you can't have titles showing on the worksheet because it will not allow the worksheet to disappear when you sheet swap. And so dynamic zone visibility, that's one thing I love about it, is that the titles will stay there and disappear when you switch to another page. And also the filters continue to work. And I don't have any filters on this, but if I did, the filters would continue to work across all the different sheets and they wouldn't disappear when you swap to another sheet. So it lands on the overview and then you click to see the ratings, which is, I keep forgetting, you don't have to hold down the Alt button to switch there. So one of the things I don't like about this Viz and that I would do differently if I had had more time is that I don't have it set to not highlight the other boxes when you click to change views. I absolutely hate that about it. And I do know the method that you use to fix that. However, I was down to the wire, and I'm always down to the wire when it comes to these. So I didn't incorporate that method to clear that up. So that very annoying piece is still there. I did these scatter plots. These scatter plots are actually a dual axis, and I don't remember which person presented this at a recent tips or tricks session at Tableau conference, where you can use a dual axis to make your scatter plot have a lighter colored circle surrounded by a darker colored border, just by making it into a dual axis and then synchronizing your axes, which I guess if I showed it, I could do. So I really liked that. And then I ended up adding a jitter plot to this just to spread it out some more because I felt like it was too bunched up. So that's how I got from the initial scatter plot to what ended up being the final scatter plot on my Viz. I also didn't always intend to use the Sankey chart to show the awards. Sorry if I back up here and actually click on awards. This is another part I don't like about my Viz that I would go back and change. I wish the buttons acted independently for each. I wish that if I click on awards here, it would only change the Grey's Anatomy awards and not all of the ones under it. Because then you get to the end of the characters, you scroll down to the next TV show, you have to click overview to start over. I would rather each one just act independently. So if you see, the awards are using the Sankey chart, which is one of the new Viz extensions, one of the only ones that renders on Tableau Public, apparently. And but before I wanted to do that, I thought about doing it as a tree map and only including the awards that the TV show won. But I ended up changing it to Sankey's because I felt like then you could see much more accurately like the volume of nominations. and then the percentage or the proportion that they won and lost over the years. Sorry, the Sankey I think is particularly interesting when you get to the very last shows on the Viz, which are Bridgerton and Queen Charlotte. I kept those together because they're companion shows. So you can see not only which shows won in which years, but it's a multi-step Sankey, which I wanted to be able to incorporate. And the only thing I don't like about this is that it doesn't seem to match the color scheme of the other charts in the piece, the red and the gray and the black and white color scheme, which came directly from the shondaland.com website. So that's the one thing I don't like about the Sankey. And then the last button is for characters. Characters ended up being the chart is a simple bar chart, but it was the most manual in terms of having to clean the data behind it, mainly because some of the characters have multiple names in the data set. I think it's actually most evident in Bridgerton and Queen Charlotte because there's a lot of overlap of the characters from one show to the next. So I have these groups created by roles. But if you put the roles in without grouping them, you can see Lady Violet Bridgerton is also under Lady Violet Ledger Bridgerton. Agatha Danbury is under Lady Danbury, and then Kate Sharma has 3 different names that show up over the course of the show. So little things like this ended up being very manual, and I absolutely hate manual cleanup in a Viz. It's not such a big deal maybe on personal Vizes where you're not updating them all the time, but it's a carryover from my day job where you are always having to update like on a daily, weekly, semester, year basis. And the more manual cleanup you have to do, then the more things you have to make sure you don't miss when you go back and update it in case you have to clean that again. So really hate the manual cleanup on this one. That's another thing I would change if I could go back and do it all over. But maybe one day they'll update the Data Plus TV data set and I'll get that chance to go and update it with more up-to-date data. I was going to show you the Viz on Tableau Public, but regardless, I'll just scroll through. You can kind of see the long form. I did learn from previous experiences doing long form that it was definitely better to go and plan out the spacing ahead of time. And even so, even doing that, it still got kind of scrunched at the bottom of this one. And I did still have to kind of make it fit. And then the last thing is that I added this QR code at the very bottom where you can click if you're viewing it or scan it if you're on your phone and go to fill out a survey to share what is your favorite Shonda Rhimes TV show. And then maybe one day, if I ever get enough responses, then I can create another Viz that shows what everyone's favorite Shonda Rhimes TV show is. And one day, maybe that'll happen. And that is all for me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ginny. Yeah, it's hard to believe how prolific Shonda really is, like how many different shows and movies and everything that she's had her hands in, and just how long Grey's Anatomy been. I remember going to Grey's Anatomy viewings when I was like a freshman in high school, or not in high school, college. But that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing all of that and your process and your approach. That was great. So great conversation. We are running a little bit short on time, so I'm just going to wrap up really quick, but that's great, everything we heard today. So Coming up next for DataPride Tug, our next event will be in early April, just prior to TC. And so we'll have an entire event focused on getting ready for TC, what to expect out of DataPride at TC, and so on and so forth. And then last, real quick, let's give away some swag. So we chose a random participant or random attendant today to receive some swag, and Kathy Bridges, that is you. If you're still in the event, I know we're towards the end, it may have dropped. If you're still in the event, yep, you are. Go ahead and I'll send you a DM here in just a second, and we will explain, or we'll discuss details on getting that to you. And everybody else, and our panelists and guests, want to thank you all again for spending your time with us, sharing your process with us. You know, it's so great hearing from all of you. And everybody in the audience, thank you for spending part of your Thursday afternoon with us. We really, really love